Welcome, everybody. I'm Paul Johnson. I'm the Senior Director of Urban and Community Forestry with Sustainable Forestry Initiative. Welcome to our first webinar on the second draft of the SFI Urban and Community Forest Sustainability Standard. I'd like to start off by acknowledging where we come from. Sustainable Forestry Initiative's diverse team of staff and consultants live and work on the ancestral territories of many indigenous nations, including from our offices on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin people in what is now Ontario, Ottawa, Ontario, and the Nashkatonk and Piscataway people in present-day Washington, D.C. We are committed to building forest-focused collaborations that recognize and respect Indigenous peoples' rights, traditional knowledge, relationships with the land, enduring leadership in forest stewardship, and responsibilities to future generations. In addition, SFI operates all meetings and conference calls under antitrust laws and regulations. All materials and items have been reviewed. We don't believe there are any issues we have before us today that will be of concern. However, if at any time you become uncomfortable with the conversation, please bring it to the attention of myself or other SFI staff, and we'll move the conversation away from those areas immediately. Again, welcome. Really excited to have the second draft out there, open for public comment. And this time around, we wanted to give people an opportunity to not just read it and respond to the survey, but also to have some conversations. And so we're hosting at least 3 of these webinars. Today is the first one. We have 2 next week. We'll talk about that at the end. We may even follow up with a 4th one before the end of the public comment period. Again, I'm Paul Johnson with SFI, and really just wanted to share with you a little bit about SFI to get us kicked off. Our vision is a world that values and benefits from sustainably managed forests. And as many of you know, those forests cover a wide range of geographies, including our urban areas. Our mission is to advance sustainability through forest-focused collaborations. And you'll see this process has been all about collaboration. Our SFI board is a diverse group. They're broken up into 3 categories of economic, environmental, and social. You'll see on this list that there are some well-known urban and community forest-focused organizations that are part of the board. And I bring up the board because ultimately this standard that is created must be accepted and put forth by the board. And so as we're going through things, just keep that in mind, that final step before it becomes a standard that's open and available for everybody, the board will have a chance to take a look at it and give their final blessing for it. SFI is primarily focused on 4 pillars. What we're talking about today falls in the standards pillar, but we also have conservation, education, including Project Learning Tree and Project Learning Tree Canada, and our community pillar. And as many of you know, urban and community forestry really crosses all of these. But because it's a new program with SFI and our primary purpose right now is the development of the standards, I am in the standards pillar. Jason Metnick is our VP in charge of standards. He's here today also, along with a few other SFI staff. Standards is really all about advancing sustainable forestry and responsible purchasing globally through certification standards and certified products. We currently have 3 certification standards. The single largest forest certification standard in the world, our SFI Forest Management Standard. We also have a fiber sourcing standard and chain of custody standard, all of which were updated and released this year. One of the things that really brought me to SFI when they decided to enter urban and community forestry as a sector was that SFI itself does not certify organizations to the standard. That is all handled by the certification bodies. And so we have a series of these accredited certification bodies that are the ones that actually go in, make sure that the organizations are doing what they say they're doing, and grant that certification. This is a kind of a new concept for urban and community forestry. In addition, I'm here because of the importance that SFI has within that world of standards and certification. As we'll talk in a moment about how we got to where we're at right now. But when they decided to move into this sector, floated the position to kind of lead the efforts, I was really excited because that third-party verification plus the recognizability and the value that the SFI logo has is really captured right here on this slide. Being able to bring those two things into urban and community forestry, where I've been focused and really invested over the last 2 decades, seemed like potentially a once in a career opportunity. And so that's really what enticed me away from Texas A&M Forest Service and leading the urban and community forestry program on the state level to something that is at least going to have an impact North America wide, if not worldwide. So let's focus in on what you're really interested in and taking a look at today, and that is what I consider to be either a roadmap or a recipe for a better future. SFI, working with the urban and community forestry sector, is creating a consensus standard built by us, and us being not just SFI, but the organizations that you see in front of you and lots of other organizations, and with you. The reason we're here today and hosting you is because your perspective on this is so important to make sure that we have as diverse a view on urban and community forestry as possible. From this point on, I'm really going to focus on urban forests and urban forestry. This is one that's been, it's kind of an interesting conversation because in the United States, we've been talking about urban and community forestry for a long time because a lot of people that live in towns and cities that aren't as big as New York, LA, Houston, don't think of themselves as being in urban areas. And so we talk about community forestry. Well, in Canada and across a lot of the world, community forestry really has a different definition. It is a more traditional forest management idea of communities that own forests and manage them for some type of forest product or recreation, something like that. And so there is definitely some crossover here. But to be as inclusive as possible, we really want to talk about urban and community forestry, but that's a mouthful to say every single time. And so we'll focus in, and the standard does this also, really focus in on urban forests and urban forestry. But I can't move on without acknowledging our partners, because one of the first questions I had when I interviewed with SFI staff, as I've been talking with people over this last year and a half, is this collaboration? And absolutely is. As you saw from our board, we have several of these organizations represented on the board that decided to open up and move into urban forestry. But American Forest, Arbor Day Foundation, International Society of Arboriculture, Society of Municipal Arborists, and Tree Canada are all named partners in this. So we all work together and they actually meet with us on a regular basis, helping to guide us through this joining of SFI and urban forestry as a sector. Before we get there, though, let's go back in time a little bit to 2020, when during the revision process, the question came up, what about urban forests? We know how important urban forests are, and yet the traditional forest management standard wasn't really appropriate for most urban forests. So SFI, being SFI, put together a really high-powered task group. They started exploring the world of urban and community forestry and put together a survey to see if urban and community forestry as a sector was interested in SFI entering. And the overwhelming majority said yes. I think it's fascinating. Over 600 people responded, and less than 1% said no. It was a very resounding, and I think it was over 90% said yes. And so it's definitely a good basis for bringing SFI into urban and community forestry. As we pulled the task group together, and we'll take a look at who's on that task group in just a minute, but we really wanted to start off with why. And so as we were looking at the why of urban forestry and an urban forest standard, it was really, what are those principles? What are those basics of why we need to be working on what we're working with? And that's because urban forests and trees are vital for community well-being, health, resiliency, and sustainability. They need proper care and management to maximize the benefits and to minimize risks. They require the understanding, awareness, and participation of people to thrive in our communities. They and their benefits should be accessible and available to all. And they are nature-based solutions to many of the challenges that we currently face, and they are green infrastructure. So that's the why of why we have a standard. This is the group that put that together. I know it's a lot of words on a slide, but there's no better way to kind of share this, except you can go to our website and pull it down if you want to know specifically. But you'll see all of those named partners are represented on here, but so is the Society of American Foresters. So is Nature Conservancy Canada. We've got the nursery industry represented. We've got universities. We've got communities. All represented in order to make sure that we have as diverse a perspective as possible, pulling together this consensus standard of what really makes for a full cycle, sustainable urban forest. So I can't tell you how proud I am of this group. They have met once to twice a month. In addition, they've worked in small groups on each of the objectives. This is my job. This is not their job. This is other duty as volunteered. Most of them volunteered themselves. I think a few people might have gotten volunteered by others. But they have really put in a lot of effort to make sure that we have as comprehensive and yet as accessible a standard as possible. We can talk more during the discussion time here in a little bit about how this scales to different size organizations. In addition, really happy to introduce you to Alex Olson. Alex just joined the team in this last month. She is an intern from Canada, has a degree from UBC in urban forestry, working on a certificate. Really a great addition to the team. She's here today. She'll be helping out by communicating with you through chat. If you have any questions that you know of already, please drop them in chat if you're not comfortable unmuting yourself and speaking up later on. She'll be watching that and helping me keep track. She also will share some links as we go through. But Alex, so happy to have you here as part of the team. One of the questions I'm often asked is, who is this standard for? Being that it's an urban forest standard, I think most people immediately focus in on communities and that traditional municipal community concept of a city, a town, something like that. But really, we're intentionally keeping the standard as open and as accessible as possible for all organizations that own, manage, or are responsible for urban forests. This could include those government organizations that we all think of, but could also include counties, states, provinces, those non-governmental organizations. Maybe you have a nonprofit in your town that does a really great job and has responsibility for a portion of the urban forest. Well, maybe they want to get that certified. One that comes to mind for me would be Up With Trees out of Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I grew up. They have some pretty significant amount of property that is urban forest that they manage. They could get that certified. We also have indigenous peoples, other community groups, but also there are those corporate organizations, healthcare, education. It would be great to see an Apple, a Google, a Tesla certify their part of the urban forest also. We'll talk about why in just a little bit. The standard is broken up into the principles, then objectives. Under each objective, and we'll look at this, you then have performance measures and indicators under each performance measure. Well, that task group that you saw put together this list of objectives, and it really starts out with community and people. That's one of the things that sets urban forestry apart from more traditional forestry, is really all of the people and the hardscape, those kinds of things. So we move from there to human health and well-being. We talk about protection and conservation of biodiversity. We talk about stewardship of natural resources such as water and air, forest and tree health and vitality, natural areas. That list goes on and on. Today, we're going to focus on the standard as an overall. The next two webinars, next Tuesday and next Thursday, we're going to break these up, and we will talk very specifically about objectives 1 through 7 on the first webinar next week, and then we'll talk about objectives 8 through 16. Yes, I know those are not evenly broken up, but when you look at the standard, objectives 15 and 16 really probably don't have a lot of discussion that needs. It's, well, 15 is all about everybody must do what they're legally responsible to do. And then 16 is very much about how you report what you have to do in order to be a certified organization. So that's why we broke it up a little bit unevenly, it seems. So here's an example of what the standard kind of looks like. So we have the objective, that objective title, and then we have a description. So for objective 1, it's all about strengthening the community, enhancing local economies, broadening public engagement, respecting diverse perspectives, recognizing indigenous rights, and ensuring equitable access for all to the many benefits of urban forests. If you notice some of these words are italicized, that's because as opposed to the first draft, in the second draft, we have definitions that we'll talk about here in a little bit. But those terms that are italicized are the terms that are defined in the glossary. So you have the objective, then you have the performance measure. Performance measure 1 is the organization will broaden public engagement. And then under each of those performance measures, you have indicators. Indicator 1 for performance measure 1, organization identifies opportunities and events for community members to support and celebrate trees. In an instance like this, maybe your community, your organization celebrates Arbor Day. That could be one of the ways that you meet this indicator as you're looking to not only work to the standard, but also then taking that next step to becoming certified to the standard. The other item that's a little bit different in this draft is that in addition to the second draft of the standard, we have a second document, which is guidance 4. The guidance includes all of the wording from the standard, because I don't want people to have to switch back and forth between the documents as you're looking at this, what would be the initial draft of a guidance document for the standard. But each of those guidance are set out with a text box so that you can see what this organization, what we're thinking could be a way. Now, this is not to limit you. This is just to give you a little bit of guidance. If you don't know how your organization might identify how human health and well-being are addressed in urban forest related resource assessments and strategies, maybe you haven't thought about including human health as you're looking at this, we've got some more organizations out there that can help you. Could look at things like heat zone maps. You could look at public health data. You could look at resources like Healthy Trees, Healthy Lives, which help give you that step towards making sure that you are meeting that indicator. To be very clear, an organization, in order to be certified, must meet each of the indicators for each of the performance measures. If you happen to have been one of the 100+ people that reviewed the first draft for us, first off, thank you. And secondly, I'd like to let you know that the task group has worked really hard to refine the standard. So it's over 25% more concise than it was the first go around. For those of you that didn't review the first one, well, you got off a little bit easy, and you'll be able to take a look at the standard that has already been refined. There will be another level of refinement as we go through the public comments from this period, but we're really dialing in, and I think have something that is, again, comprehensive and yet accessible. As I mentioned, we do have definitions this time. So at the end of both the guidance document and the standard itself, there are quite a few definitions. The last page of the survey, which we'll talk about, gives you an opportunity to give feedback on the definitions, but the survey mechanism is already long enough that I didn't want to put all of the definitions in it. So there is a link to the standard itself so that you can open it up next to the survey window and you can look through those definitions. I already know that, like I said, this is the initial draft with definitions and guidance, and so there is room for improvement. You'll see right here at BMPs, I brought this one over from the glossary for our forest management standard, and it needs to be expanded a little bit. So there's definitely room if you're interested in what words mean and you want to take a little bit of time. This would be a great way for somebody to help in the development of the standard. So we're really here because we need your help. Not only will your discussion today help guide us in this process, but you do have access to the SurveyMonkey. You can just scan the QR code if you want and go straight to it. This comment period ends on August 2nd. So we opened it up last week, so it's open for more than 30 days, just to make sure, knowing that it's the summer in the Northern Hemisphere, that people may not be available the entire time. We opened up a little bit longer. If you wanted to go that next step, we're actually testing the second draft with different organizations. We'll talk about that in a second, with the ultimate goal of finalizing the standard the rest of this year and launching next year in 2023. Again, remind you that it will have to go through several steps, including board approval, but we really are on target to be able to get this out and let people start using it and make sure that it is appropriate. In addition to the third-party accreditation, proof that you're actually doing what you say you're doing, the value of the SFI logo and brand. The other thing that I really like is SFI updates their standards about every 5 years. As I said, the Forest Management Standard et al. Just was updated and the new release this year. So this will be the first, and we will go in and further refine, and in about 5 years we'll be coming out to you again saying, here, things may have changed a little bit, and maybe human health isn't at the top of the list. Maybe there's another issue that has risen as being something that really needs to be highlighted, and that will give us that opportunity to continue to improve the standard over time. Any of you that have done a SurveyMonkey know what the survey looks like. Here's an example of the opening. It's got the kind of description about how the survey works, why we're doing what we're doing. It's not a short survey. The estimate is takes about 30 minutes to complete it. But I've got a secret just to share with you and everybody else that read the email. You don't have to fill out every single comment. The first go around had somebody that put NA on everything as they went through. The only 2 lines that you have to fill out are your name and your email address. And no, we're not going to share your email with anybody else, but it's just to be able to track your comments and make sure that if there's a technical difficulty, if you've gone through half of it and your computer dies for some reason, every time you hit next at the bottom of the page, SurveyMonkey saves what you've entered up to that point. And so if your computer dies in the middle of a page and you want to come back, all you have to do is zip forward to that page that you were filling out when things went wrong. Or maybe you don't have a 30-minute stretch, you're going to do it 10 minutes at a time. You can do 10 minutes worth, then you can come back, start a new survey, skip ahead to where you ended, and go from there. And having your name and your email address will be able to put those comments together so that we know that it was you providing those comments and not 3 different people providing different segments of comments. So if you're only interested in Objective 2, human health, all you have to do is at the bottom of the page of those first few pages is scroll down, hit next, and get to the objective that you're interested in, and then scroll down to each of those subsequent pages, go to the end and hit submit, and you've provided the comments for those areas that you want. So don't let the size of the survey keep you from participating if you're only interested in sharing on certain of the objectives. Talked about testing the standard. We have, as you see on the screen, several organizations that are really excited, think that they're there based upon the first draft, or at least awfully close. And so the likes of Clemson, Wake Forest, Eugene, Rouge National Park in Canada, we already have some organizations, but if your organization would like to get a jump start, if you would like to help us really dial in the standard, this is going to be a separate survey mechanism, but rather than just giving us your opinion on what the standard says, we're actually going to go in and ask, okay, do you think you've met indicator 1.1.1? And if so, you say yes, and then you say, here's how we would show it. And if you wanted to, you could even put in an estimate of how long you think it would take for you to be able to show that you met that indicator. Because we're trying to also make sure that we understand what kind of a commitment this is for an organization. And so with this testing of the standard, we're going to know, number one, are there objectives, performance measures, or indicators that nobody can meet just yet? So maybe we need to refine it a little bit more. Or are there certain areas that might take a lot more time, and therefore we think that it's overly burdensome and we may be able to simplify a little bit. And so if you're interested, email me, paul.johnson@forest.org, easy email address to remember. And now we're going to open it up for you. This was all leading to this moment. If you are interested in just putting your question into the chat box, you're welcome to do that. But if you'd like to turn your camera on or not unmute yourself and ask a question. We've got a small enough group today that I think that we can do this without having to be overly burdensome. But who has a question or something that you would like to discuss? Well, as you are coming up with that question or deciding on what you would like, I do have a few common questions that I thought I would start with first. And one that we all often get is, what is it going to cost? And the answer there is we don't know yet. Because it is a third-party verified credential, we have to have the standard fairly well dialed in before we can start working with those accreditation bodies on what they think it would take in order to come in, verify, and be able to grant that certification. If you look at Forest Management Standard as an example, the Forest Management Standard often from the conversation that I've had is somewhere in the $3,000 to $5,000 range for that initial audit and accreditation. But until we start talking with some of those organizations, we won't know for sure. I do know that there are a lot of organizations out there, particularly municipalities, that are concerned about those costs. I think there's a lot of ways that we can look at that. In the U.S., with the U.S. Forest Service having more funds than they've had for quite some time, I think that this would be a natural partnership with state forestry. Many of our states have urban forestry programs that have grants. This could be something that they could work into their grant program and support. I think it's entirely possible that a foundation or a nonprofit might partner with another organization to do some fundraising or fund providing to make this more accessible for that organization. I also know, having worked with many, many cities across the state of Texas, that most municipalities seem to find the resources for the things that they think are important. And it's just incumbent upon us to make sure that this value proposition of the standard and the certification is worth that investment. And that's part of why you are here. So we're looking forward to hearing from you about how you think you would be able to utilize this. Any questions or thoughts to this point?
Hey, Paul, one thing just to add on to that, and for those that are on the line, one of the things that we're hoping to get some good input and feedback on as well during this comment period is the certification process. And so if you have ideas of audit firms or ways to go about the certification process, please include that in your public comment period. Historically, SFI has used accredited certification bodies that are accredited under ANSI, ANAB, or the Standards Council of Canada. That adds additional layers and complexities, but it also adds credibility to the work that certification bodies do. And so, is there a way that we can look at auditors and certification bodies in a new way, still ensuring that we have that credibility for those qualifications and for the work that they do? But if you do have thoughts, please include that in your comments as well.
Yes, thank you, Jason. Absolutely agree. One of the other things that I really like about this is it's opening up new business, whether it is a consulting firm. I see some people on the meeting here that may utilize this to work with communities and help you sell your services to help them do a better job. but they're also going to be subject matter experts that are needed by whoever is auditing and kind of reviewing these communities, organizations that want to become certified. And so whether it's a consulting arborist from ASCA or some other avenue, I think there's just overall going to be more and new business opportunities that are coming up, which will be exciting.
Paul, we've got a question in the chat from
Yes.
Gordy. He says, any thoughts on the timing of future revisions to the standard?
Absolutely. Thank you, Gordy. I really do think that we will follow a similar timeline to what we do with the other SFI standards. So we're looking at probably about a 5-year revision cycle. That way we're not changing things too quickly. This opens up, and I want to point out that the guidance document is a living document. And so that will continue to grow and improve over time. Whereas the standard, once it's approved by the board, it will be set until the revision is then approved by the board. That's something I didn't talk about earlier that I wanted to make sure that people knew. Very good. Anybody have a question or maybe a concern that you have? If you've had a chance to look at either the first draft or this draft. Again, this is really your opportunity to have some feedback outside of the survey mechanism itself. All right, while you're thinking, I've got another common question, and that is, what about Tree City USA, Tree Cities of the World, the Arbor Day Foundation programs? As you noticed, they are a partner in this, and I've had lots of conversations with Dan Lamb, and both of us see this as a collaboration. So Tree City USA, over 40 years of success, just thousands of communities that have participated in that. They've grown to the college campuses, now growing to healthcare, the K through 12. Really a very successful program, utilities. That may be the entryway that some organizations take to then want to take that next step of becoming certified to the SFI standard. On the other hand, because of the strength of the SFI network, we have so many organizations out there that believe in SFI and what we do, that we have leaders in those organizations that often live in a community. And therefore, they may be able to take this new offering to the city manager, to the city council, mayor, and say, SFI has been really good for my business, and now you can utilize a similar mechanism. And so I think that there may be some cases where people come into better management of their urban forest through the SFI standard, which then could lead them to Tree City USA, or could lead them to SMA's accredited urban forestry program. And so I think it really does make sense for us to continually communicate that this is a two-way collaboration. That's, I think, the basis of that word collaboration is both organizations, both sectors, et cetera, all the parties involved have that opportunity to benefit.
I'm just going to share the last two, the second and the third webinar in the chat as well, just for the people that joined late.
Very good.
While you're all thinking of some questions and comments.
So if you don't mind, I know several of you well enough that I'll call on you, and you can always say no if you can't. But Kieran, you are serving on the task group. Just wanted to give you an opportunity if you wanted to share something with the group.
Thanks, Paul. I guess the only thing I have to add, because, I feel like you've done a great job of summarizing things. I'll just mention that this was really a labor of love between a lot of really, what I felt were very impressive, highly qualified professionals in a really diverse array of fields in urban forestry and community forestry. So I've just felt really privileged to even be involved in these discussions with some of these professionals. So I've got a lot of faith in where this is going. I'm excited to see what happens through the next series of public comments. And I would encourage anybody who's interested in this, or if you're skeptical about it, to either way, just please participate in the public comments period, because that is the best way that we're going to continue to shape this into the best version that it can be. So thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Kieran. Really appreciate that. And we're privileged to have you on the group. Kieran has added a lot. Each of the members of the task group have really worked hard on this and have done a great job. I think that it is very important that we stress what Kieran just said, is your participation makes all the difference. So making sure that you participate through the survey mechanism, discussion here, either of the webinars next week. Alex has shared those, but I'll go ahead and just put up the reminder that we do have 2 more opportunities at least to have a little bit more discussion here. This also gives you an opportunity to go in and take a look at things. You may have some specific questions that you want to bring on Tuesday or Thursday of next week because you're particularly interested in one of those objectives. Making sure that this is scalable is another very common question. Certification probably won't be for all organizations. There are some organizations that may choose to adopt the standard and work to the standard and never take that next step of kind of proving it and getting certified. I would encourage it because I think that particularly as we're moving into the future where on the corporate side, ESG, sustainability is becoming so important when we've got mayors, city councils that are making pledges based upon heat or based upon climate change. I really think that it's important that we as a sector go a little further than we've gone in the past, which is being able to prove what we're doing and what we've done. One of the really exciting things that I think will come from this is we will be able to talk about the impact that the standard has on conservation topics like biodiversity. Biodiversity, in my 2 decades of urban and community forestry, particularly kind of being based in the south of the US, never really a super high priority as we're looking at things like human health, energy savings, those kinds of things, protection from heat, climate change. Biodiversity has never really floated to the top of that list. And that's the power of a standard like this, is it helps create a very across the board reminder of what is that roadmap? What are the things that we need to think about? It's not just about getting an assessment, whether that's an inventory or a tree canopy map, and then creating a an urban forest management plan and an annual work plan, making sure that we're planting at least as many trees as we're removing, protecting people from those risks that trees do pose during storms, etc. It's more than that. Urban and community forestry is very, very important. Or as I like to say in a previous life, trees are key. They really are key to healthier, happier, safer communities. And by having this guidance that we haven't had before as a sector, we've had great starts and stops over time, including U.S. Forest Service has kind of an audit program that they put out to help people. You've got the different tree toolkits from Public Works Association, from American Forest, all of these different groups, but we've not really had something quite like this, which is, I think, what makes it very, very special. All right. Joseph, Mike, anybody else who I know well enough to call on? Anything that you would like to add during this portion? All right. Hearing nothing, seeing nothing, we can start to wrap this up. Again, thank you for being here. I know this one's really just an introduction, and so maybe you're not ready to dive into each of the objectives, but there is the 2 more opportunities, as you see on the screen, next Tuesday and next Thursday. We'll really start to dive in and look at each one of the objectives a little bit closer. Let me tell you, this task group has been very specific with their wording selection, trying to find something that works for small organizations and large organizations, from the at least deep South Texas and Florida all the way up through Canada into Alaska, from the East Coast to the West Coast, from temperate rainforest all the way through desert areas. You have to have something that is very general and specific at the same time. And so we've tried to be very specific on what we want you to be thinking about, but not so specific on how we want you to accomplish it. That's where you get to do some interpretation and making sure that what you're doing is appropriate for your location. And so there's I don't know, it's been one of the most fun projects that I've been privileged enough to work on. Ah, wonderful. Thank you, Alex. Yes, this recording will be available through our website. I don't know whether it'll be YouTube or exactly where, but we'll make sure that it is out there and that everybody has a chance to take a look, go through this, and then join us next week. Any final thoughts, comments, or questions? All right, hearing nothing, I will just say thank you to everybody, and we will call this to an end. Hopefully, we'll see you next week. Thanks.